Well, we're officially in a recession after gross domestic product fell 0.3% in the final quarter of last year.
This is the first recession since the pandemic. Well, joining us in the studio is political editor of the Daily Express, Sam Lister, and barrister and columnist Sam Fowles. Welcome to you both this morning. There is some people saying that we need to be a little less dramatic about this, Sam. It is a technical recession, but the overall picture is more of stagnation.
Yeah, the figures were slightly worse than people were predicting, but actually, overall, for the whole of last year, it looks like the economy grew slightly by 0.1%. So if you look at the whole year and take it into account over the whole 12 months, we didn't actually kind of contract. I mean, these are very marginal figures, 0.1% minus 0.3%. It's all kind of dancing on the head of a pin, isn't it? So I think actually stagnation is a better description. And technical recession was a kind of invented term, I think it was in the 70s or 80s. It was just to try and make it easier for people to understand when the economy was really failing. But actually, we're not really in that position. We're just kind of flatlining.
I mean, I'm old enough to remember recession in the 70s and 80s when the real problem then was mass unemployment.
Yeah.
Soaring unemployment, hit 3 million. Employment in this country is pretty good, the employment figures.
Yeah, and obviously yesterday we saw the inflation figures. They were slightly better than expected, but again, it was kind of marginal. So I think the problem is really, employment is not the problem it was in the 70s and 80s. It doesn't feel to people like we're actually in a recession, I think. Obviously, cost of living is an issue, but it doesn't feel like it did in the 70s or 80s, where you've got those big queues of people at the job centre, all that kind of thing. And actually, we're probably already out of this recession, that's the truth. So, we've been in and out and nobody's noticed.
What do you think, Sam?
I think I agree that we need to take a much longer term look at this. 0.1 here, 0.3 there. That's not the issue. But we do need to have a conversation about why, for the past 10 years, we've been in and out of these technical recessions. We've been stagnating. When you look at I think the more worrying things are like looking at the level of investment in the economy. And over the past 10 years or so, Britain has become less interesting for investors, less attractive. Productivity for Britain compared to the United States and France and Germany, we're behind all of those. We're not as good an economy as we need to be.
And productivity has been an issue for years and years. What's the problem?
Investment. The thing that's stopping productivity is we haven't invested in capital and we haven't invested in infrastructure. And although we've invested somewhat in skills, we haven't invested enough. So when people are thinking about, are we going to invest in Britain, they're thinking, well, why would we at this point? Because you don't have the stuff that you need to grow an economy. And that is the result of government policy over the past, since 2011, when government policy has been to contract the economy, to not invest in the economy, and just hope that somehow, magically, the private sector steps in, even when you've created an economic context that discourages the private sector from stepping in.
Sam, we are hoping to hear from Jeremy Hunt this morning. He won't be drawn on the details of the spring budget next month, but he does keep talking about this sticking to the plan. He trots this line out frequently.
The government's position is basically, if we are getting there. It's been slow, it's been painful, but we're getting there. And if you switch to Labour, you go back to square one. That's their pitch. I think actually, I know Sam said, I think Sam was slightly unfair there when he said that the government was trying to make the economy contract. I don't think that's fair. I think obviously when the Conservative government came in, there was a global financial crisis which took a long time to get out of. I think you'll find with Rishi Sunak in the Chancellor's autumn statement, they focused on business and they put an awful lot of tax breaks into allowing companies to invest in infrastructure, and the companies basically now get 100% of their investment back. So I think that will make a big difference.
But what is with that, Sam? I mean, we had the measures that don't come into April, and yet the national insurance cuts came in January.
Yeah.
Why couldn't we all have come in January to kickstart investment straight away? I just don't understand it.
It's a very good point. And actually, the NI cut coming in January, that was very much targeted at allowing employers to bring in new employees. It was to create jobs, to boost the economy. And so, perhaps there was an argument for doing everything in January. I think what they're going to aim for in the March budget is to obviously lower personal taxes so people do feel a bit better. But obviously at this tricky time, you've got to kind of really measure how far you want to go.
Yeah.
It's going to be a very fine balancing act for them.
But Sam, the Joseph Rowntree Foundation is saying, you know, yes, it's concerning that we've entered this technical recession, but that's not at the forefront of people's minds here. People up and down the country are looking at how much food they've got in the fridge, how much money is in their pocket at the end of the month.
Absolutely, and that comes down to the fundamentals of the economy. We have a cost of living crisis because ordinary people have been forced to bear the costs of bringing down inflation, have been forced to bear the costs of the various different sort of economic adventures that governments have been on over the past 10 years and haven't worked. We have... And this doesn't have to be an argument about whether Brexit was a good idea or a bad idea, but the type of Brexit that we went through, we have signed trade agreements that are less advantageous than we had before. The type of Brexit that we went through put up more barriers than it did before. So ordinary people that are wanting to do business, you know, small businesses are facing more barriers. All of these make life more difficult for just your sort of small and medium-sized enterprises.
But you talk about lack of government investment. For God's sake, this country's in more debt. The debt burden in this facing country, it's trillions. It's eye-watering. The figures are almost monopoly board money, and also the tax burden is at an all-time high. So where is this money to come from, Sam, to invest?
Well, the mistake that we keep making is thinking that a national economy is like a household economy or a credit card. And it doesn't work like that. We mentioned back in 2011, the government said, we've got lots of debt, so we need to cut everything, and that's going to bring the debt down. We're here in 2024, and the debt's only gone up.
Well, we did have a pandemic.
And we had but even before the pandemic thing, even before the pandemic thing, the debt problem hadn't been solved. And other countries which didn't make those mistakes, for example, the United States, doesn't have the same problems as us. So, in order to grow an economy, you have to invest in things like infrastructure, which we have just not properly invested in at all, and the only way to pay down the debt is to grow the economy relative to it. But if you don't try and grow the economy first, you never pay down the debt.
This sounds like the mantra from the Labour Party. We're going to grow the economy, which is how we reduce debt and we get investment. But how do you do that?
Well, the mantra from the left is always to spend more money, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the question is never how can we make things more productive, more efficient. It is, let's chuck more money at this. And that obviously puts up taxes. And I think already when we've got such a high tax burden, I don't think that is a solution people are looking for.